Preston Thomas Tucker was born on September 21, 1903, on a peppermint farm near Capic, Michigan, United States of America. He grew up outside Detroit in the suburb of Lincoln Park, Michigan. Tucker was raised by his mother after his father died of appendicitis when Preston was 2 years old. First learning to drive at age 11, Tucker was obsessed with automobiles from an early age. At age 16, Preston Tucker began purchasing late model automobiles, repairing/refurbishing them, and selling the cars for a profit. He attended the Cass Technical High School in Detroit, Michigan, but he quit school and landed a job as an office boy for the Cadillac Motor Company, where he used roller skates to make his rounds more efficiently. In 1922, young Tucker joined the Lincoln Park, Michigan Police Department. His mother had him removed from the force, pointing out to department officials that he was below the department's minimum required age. Tucker and his new wife, Vera, then took over a 6-month lease on a gas station near Lincoln Park, running the station together. Vera would run the station during the day while Preston worked on the Ford Motor Company assembly line. After the lease ran out, Tucker quit Ford and returned to the police force again. But in his first winter back, he was banned from driving police vehicles after using a blowtorch to cut a hole in the dashboard of the cruiser to allow engine heat to warm the cabin, as heating vents in cars didn't exist at the time. During the last couple of months at the gas station, Tucker began selling Studebaker cars on the side. He met an automobile salesman, Michael Dulian. Dulian hired Tucker as a car salesman in his Detroit dealership. Tucker did very well, but the dealership was a long drive from his Lincoln Park home, and so Tucker quit and returned to the police force. A few months later, Dulian, still impressed with Tucker's immediate success as a salesman, invited Tucker to move south with him to Memphis, Tennessee, to work as a sales manager. Tucker stayed in Memphis and was a salesman for Ivan Schmidt of Stutz Motors. While managing sales in Memphis, Tucker made a connection with Pierce Arrow Motor Car Company. In 1933, Tucker moved to Buffalo, New York, and became regional sales manager for Pierce Arrow Automobiles. But after only 2 years, he moved back to Detroit and worked as a Dodge salesman for Cass Motors. During the early 1930s, Tucker began an annual 1-month trek to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, having a heavy interest in the race cars and their designs. Tucker met Harry Miller, maker of more Indianapolis 500 winter engines than any other during this period. Tucker moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, to be closer to the racing car development scene. Tucker persuaded Miller to join him in building race cars, and they formed Miller & Tucker Incorporated. In 1935, the company's first job was to build 10 modified Ford V8 racers for Henry Ford. The time to develop and test the cars was insufficient, and the steering boxes on all entrants overheated and locked up, causing them to drop out of the race. In 1939, Tucker moved his family back to Michigan and bought a house and property in Ypsilanti. Opportunity arose for Tucker from the Dutch government, who wanted a combat vehicle suitable to the muddy Dutch terrain. Continuing his work relationship with Harry Miller, Tucker began developing a narrow wheelbase armored combat car powered by a Miller modified Packard V12 engine. The car was nicknamed the Tucker Tiger. Production of the car was to be done at the Rahway, New Jersey factory owned by the American Armament Corporation. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands in the spring of 1940 before Tucker could complete the deal, and the Dutch government lost interest. So he completed the prototypes and opted to try to sell the vehicle to the U.S. government. The U.S. military felt the vehicle was too fast and had already committed to other combat vehicles. The highly mobile, power-operated gun turret feature on the Tucker combat car, which became known as the Tucker turret, earned the interest of the U.S. Navy. The Tucker turret was soon in production. While the turret is often reported to have been used widely on bombers like the B-17 and B-29, it was actually developed for a different bomber, the Douglas B-18 Bolo. In the end, no Tucker turrets equipped any bombers. Tucker's patents and royalty rights were confiscated by the U.S., and Tucker was embroiled in lawsuits for years trying to recoup royalties for use of patents on the turret. After the war, the public was ready for totally new car designs, but the big three Detroit automakers had not developed any new models since 1941. That provided great opportunities for new, small, independent automakers who could develop new cars more rapidly than the huge legacy automakers. Tucker saw his opportunity to develop and bring his car of tomorrow to market. Tucker's future car became known as the Tucker Torpedo. However, not desiring to bring to mind the horrors of World War II, Tucker quickly changed the name to the Tucker 48. A sportier version of the Tucker 48, called the Tucker Talisman, was sketched as well, but never left the drawing board. Tucker assembled a group of leaders for his corporation that read like a who's who of the automotive industry. Tucker and his colleagues were able to obtain the largest factory building in the world, the 475-acre Dodge Chicago aircraft engine plant, from the War Assets Administration. Tucker signed the lease in July 1946. Tucker needed this money to get going, so he began raising money by selling dealerships' rights and floating a $20 million stock issue through the Chicago brokerage firm Floyd D. Cerf, with over $17 million in the bank by 1947. The Tucker Corporation was up and running. While Tucker ultimately got the plant, he was not able to move in until September 1947 because of delays caused by counterclaims and disputes over the plant between Tucker and the Lustron Corporation. That delayed Tucker by almost a year. Tucker's specifications for his Revolution car called for a rear engine, a low RPM 589 cubic inch engine with hydraulic valves, fuel injection, direct drive torque converters on each rear wheel instead of a transmission, disc brakes, the location of all instruments within the diameter and reach of the steering wheel, a padded dashboard, self-sealing tubeless tires, independent springless suspension, a chassis that protected occupants in a side impact, a roll bar within the roof, a laminated windshield designed to pop out during an accident, and a center Cyclops headlight, which would turn when steering at angles greater than 10 degrees in order to improve visibility around corners during night driving. While most of these innovations made it to the final 51 prototypes, several were dropped for their cost and lack of time to develop such mechanically complicated designs. The low RPM 589 cubic inch engine, individual torque converters, mechanical fuel injection, and the disc brakes were all dropped during the design and testing phase. Tucker ultimately settled on a modified Franklin O335 aircraft engine. He liked the engine so much he purchased its manufacturer for $1.8 million in 1947. The Securities and Exchange Commission bothered the Tucker Corporation from its earliest days. One of Tucker's most innovative business ideas caused the most trouble for the company and was used by the SEC to spark its formal investigation. His accessories program raised funds by selling accessories before the car was even in production. Potential buyers who purchased Tucker accessories were guaranteed a spot on the dealer waiting list for a Tucker 48 car. In 1949, Tucker surrendered his corporate records to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. United States Attorney Otto Kerner Jr. began a grand jury investigation in February 1949. Soon thereafter, on June 10, 1949, Tucker and 6 other Tucker Corporation executives were indicted on 25 counts of mail fraud, 5 counts of violations of SEC regulations, and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud. Tucker publicly called the charges silly and ridiculous, and hailed the indictment as an opportunity to explain our side of the story. The trial began on October 4, 1949. Tucker Corporation's factory was closed on the very same day. At that point, only 37 Tucker 48s had been built. 300 loyal employees returned to the factory, some without pay, and finished assembly of another 13 cars for a total production of 50 cars. Tucker Vice President Lee Treese testified that Tucker's metal stamping and parts fabrication operations were 90% ready to mass produce the car by June 1948, and that outside interference had slowed the final preparations for production. This back and forth between the prosecution and the defense continued until November 8, 1949, when the judge demanded the SEC prosecutors get down to the meat of the case and start proving the conspiracy charge. The tide turned in Tucker's favor when the government called its final witness, SEC accountant Joseph Turnbull, who testified that Tucker had taken in over $28 million and spent less than 1/7 of it on research and development of the car. He stated that Tucker had taken over $500,000 of the investors' money for himself, but never delivered a production car. Kirby rebutted Turnbull's claims on cross-examination, asking for proof of the allegations of financial mismanagement from Tucker's seized financial records. Turnbull was unable to offer such evidence. On January 22nd, 1950, after 28 hours of deliberations, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty on all counts for the accused. Tucker had prevailed at the trial, but the Tucker Corporation, now without a factory, buried in debt, and faced with numerous lawsuits from Tucker dealers who were angry about production delays, thus was no more. In the early 1950s, Tucker teamed up with investors from Brazil to build a sports car called the Carioca. The Tucker Carioca, however, was never developed. Tucker's travels to Brazil were plagued by fatigue, and upon his return to the United States, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Tucker died from pneumonia as a complication of lung cancer on December 26, 1956, at the age of 53. If you liked the video, please press the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram, links in the description. And if you want to financially support the channel, please do so by going over to my Patreon page. This is the last episode of Pocket Bios Series 1. Thank you to all who watched every episode and to those who watched a lot of them. The series will be returning after the conclusion of another project entitled The First Ladies. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching and farewell.